What's going on, guys? ITP Paladin 929 here. So, two quick updates before I actually begin with this video. First is that I initially wanted to try and make this a kind of like a series that I would do every other off day. Make a quick video about pretty much any subject. I didn't really get much feedback, and I didn't expect there to be any, but on the off chance there was, throw it out there. So, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm just going to do it whenever there's like a patch note for either something interesting like on Overwatch or put it on Call of Duty. I'm going to cover it. In fact, actually, speaking of Call of Duty, there's something kind of news going on with the Warzone area, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. This one's going to be for Overwatch and the experimental update. And the second is that, again, if you guys want me to cover anything in particular, please consider subscribing and just letting me know in the comment section below. And hopefully with this, I would like to actually discuss this with people, quite honestly. I'm just going to spitball this the entire way. So let's get started, shall we? We're already 1 minute in. Let's just get into it. We're taking a look at the experimental patch note that came out for March 4th, which was 2 days ago, so I'm unfortunately a little late, and people have already seen it. The reason I'm giving my opinions on these is because, again, I actually want to try and talk with people about it and see what people's opinions are, as well as just get a little more comfortable with possibly, expanding my area of like operation into the Overwatch scene, or rather on Twitch and YouTube for Overwatch. And my little girl, she's in the middle of like eating, and she likes to cry when the bottle's taken away to burp. So anyway, let's get started with the first hero on the list, and that's Genji. So, developer comment, we're going to actually keep that one for last and explain everything after the patch notes, because it just makes it a little easier. So shurikens have their recovery lowered from 0.75 to 0.68, and his Dragon Blade ultimate cost is increased by 15%. The developer comment states that they're increasing his shuriken fire rate to enable him to have more impact outside of his ultimate, and increasing the cost of his Dragon Blade to account for the increased damage potential. Okay. Being as a primary... Okay, so let me start this over. When I first started playing the game, I was trying to find my place in it pretty much like anybody else would. Or like, if you didn't figure it out at the beginning, it took you a little while to figure out where you were. So my initial thing was trying to figure out where I wanted to be in this game and see what heroes I liked, what I would feel more comfortable with, what role I preferred. I ultimately landed on damage, and I wanted to just be an overall damage player, but then I realized that that was too much to grasp at because you could never please everybody with your pick. And on top of that, there's just so many mishmash, like, confusing... I don't know how more to describe it other than basically it became so muddled. I was like, okay, I got to narrow this down to some heroes that I can keep consistency with. So ultimately, I went with Hitscan. So coming from a Hitscan player that plays against these heroes on the most part, Genji was kind of one of the more difficult ones. And if anybody followed my channel for a while, you know that I'm a Soldier 76 guy, like really on the guy. And Genji is one of those heroes that's hard to hit. So when they're doing this, increasing his damage, not really directly increasing his damage, but they are increasing the rate of how fast he can recover with his shurikens. So it will increase the damage output over the period of time. Like, it'll be, instead of 1,000, like, this is just an example, obviously, like 1,000 damage over the course of 10 seconds to fire all his shurikens, it's now 1,000 damage over 9 seconds. That's 1 extra second you could be reloading and start firing and get off a little bit more damage. And again, that's just an example. I don't think that's the exact math, but we'll basically digress. But I want to also note, too, that there was a patch a while back ago that I think is not really talked about so much when it comes to these types of balancings to the ultimate cost, but everybody's ultimate was increased by a set percentage, except for a few heroes who actually had like certain exceptions, like D.Va, when she was remeching after losing it, would keep it because if it was increased, she would just never get back in, and it defeated the purpose of giving her a second chance. So now they're increasing his ultimate cost again, and it's like, wow, this nobody can certainly catch a break. Although, in all fairness, in my games, I did notice that it was a little easy for him to get his Dragon Blade with his damage output, and the fact that he's very mobile is hard to hit him. So if you know how to play him and you know how to maneuver, that was basically it. So not a bad balance change. I like the swap off, and I think it doesn't really hurt him so much. So I don't think it's going to be an issue. Next things next, we're going to take a look at Mei and her Cryo Freeze, her one defensive ability to like save her life. Her healing per second increased from 37.5 to 50. And a while ago, there was a change to make it her collision consistent with her ice wall, making it so she could no longer be targeted by allies while inside her block of ice. That was kind of like a good change, in my opinion, because this was already enough of a life-saving ability, and then having another support hero be able to get her in there was just a little bit like OP. I mean, I can't really describe it, and quite truthfully, I don't remember much about it, so I won't discuss this unless I actually do a little more research and remembering. But they're increasing her Cryo Freeze healing rate since she isn't able to be easily healed up by other allies during that time. So, this is a good change, because Mei, a lot of people are complaining that she is a little OP, but if she is in the middle of a team fight, which is usually where she is, she's on stall, she's facing once again sixth. She needs whatever help she can get, and most of the time, she's not even able to get most of her health back by the time she comes back, and they made the one buff to her where she was able to recover ammo at the same time. So this is actually a really good change to, or rather a really good buff to her ability, because it gives her more survivability, because the cooldown remains unchanged, and it's all a very long cooldown, but this basically means that she'll be back at full health, and if the ammo worked itself out the way it should have, then you would have full ammo as well. But ultimately, I think it's a good change. It's not too overpowering, and it really doesn't do much, considering that if it's a 1v6 situation, she'll get melted within a moment, regardless of how good she is. Next, we see Pharah on here. In general, her hover jet regeneration increased from 35 to 43. And I'm going to just summarize this one because I know what exactly they're doing here. They're basically trying to make it so that she can remain in the air longer without hitting the ceiling of the level, which is a good change. Pharah needs to be airborne to get value. Now, this again coming from a soldier main who finds it sometimes near impossible to kill her from a distance while she's in the air before she can kill you. She's in a complicated position where you can't buff her too much or she'll be overpowered, and you can't nerf her too much or she'll just be utterly useless. She's right now in like a, I want to say sweet spot, but it's not really a sweet spot. It's a little iffy right now. Like, you could give or take based upon rank. But her hover jet regeneration rate, I remember that there was a mention in a video by Jane, very nice guy. He was, I think, the assistant, or if not the coach for Dallas Fuel back in 2019, if I recall correctly. So definitely give that guy a follow. He's got great information, and he's trying to expand his avenues as well. But there was a video that he put out for Pharah that basically talked about how to use her hover jets properly, and that if you used it in a different way than you would normally do it, like normally you'd press and hold the trigger, you'd fly up, and then you'd wait for the bar to fill, and then you'd fly, and then you just go down and lose altitude. If you did it a certain way, it actually regenerated faster, and you'd actually be climbing rather than falling. So with this, it kind of makes it easier now to maintain because it'll recover a little bit faster, and I actually find that to be very useful. So Pharah will now be more airborne, which is good for her character. Not really so good in counterplay, but I understand why she needs it, because again, based upon different ranks, she could either be useless or she could be overpowered. It really is just very dependent, and right now I'm pretty sure she's on the lower end of that one. So not a bad balance change. Next on the list, trying to hurry this along, comes Reaper, his Hellfire shotguns. So I'm not going to actually cover this one because this was actually in the previous experimental mode where they were trying to narrow his, not field of view, it was narrow his hitbox. So where his shotgun would have a blast about yay big, and now they narrowed it so that it aims at a more specific spot, giving him a little more range, consistency. And then they increased the damage to 6. But when the patch went through from the experimental to the game, they decreased the damage, saying it was too strong. So basically now they're doing the same thing that they did the first time, which is increase it back to 6 and seeing if it remains consistent and see if, if they don't need to edit anything. And quite honestly, I never really liked playing against Reaper. I always believed he had like some form of phantom range, but it's an argument for another video. And quite honestly, I don't have the time or patience. If I'm not, yep, there's just 2 more. Yep. So second to last hero is Sigma. His cooldown for experimental barrier is reduced from 2.5 seconds to 2 seconds. And while the previous cooldown increase for experimental barrier had been intended effect of opening up more counterplay, in other words, use more of your abilities, and you'd be... I have to definitely explain that wrong. I'll correct that in a bit. Counterplay for you against him. There is a tuning value that feels less restrictive for Sigma and still achieves these goals. So basically what they're wanting to do is make Sigma not as useless, but in my opinion, he was a very strong tank hero, especially for the abilities he has. And if anybody knew him at release, he was absolutely broken from the moment he came into the game, and he was basically the best of every tank on the list without their negative side effects. And this is just my opinion again, and I can go into another video later on. I'm losing time here. But essentially, their cooldown reducing means that he'll be able to put out his barrier a little bit quicker, like half a second quicker. I don't think that's going to make too much of a difference and make him that much more powerful, but at the same time, I always believed he needed some form of balancing that he's just not getting here. So we'll bypass that for now. Last but not least, we come to Zarya. So her change is not very large, but basically they said that she's a little more powerful, so they're trying to increase her drain a tiny bit on her energy, so that way it's a significant, but not too significantly changed and decreased slightly between engagements, meaning that in one instance you'd keep a majority of your energy for the next fight, whereas in the other instance they're trying to lower it so that it's a little lower. Like, you have a team fight, she builds this much energy. And then between team fights, you would have this much energy. So they're trying to make it so that it's this, and it goes down to maybe that. Maybe half. I don't know. Quite truthfully, I think that this was maybe not too necessary, because Zarya, they say, is a very powerful tank, and she is a very powerful tank, considering her abilities, but the problem is that it requires a decent amount of teamwork that I don't feel a lot of people utilize. All in all, for this entire patch for the experimental card, I don't hate it. I actually like all the changes that they did. And surprisingly enough, Genji, like, I don't really hate Pharah. I definitely don't like Sigma too much as far as playing against him, and I don't like playing against Genji, but as far as these updates go, every hero has to have a viability of some sort, and I definitely like this patch. And I think it's not going to be too bad. If they don't push this through on Tuesday, I'm going to dedicate Monday to playing this game and trying to do more of the experimental patch and just like play through with these heroes. And primarily, again, I'm hit scan, but if anybody's watched me, they'd know I play a couple of other heroes as well. So I may dabble in playing a little bit of Mei, Pharah, and Reaper, and then maybe go on my other account and try out Genji. Or I'll just keep my projectile heroes to my projectile account and go from there. But other than that, I am losing my voice. I've had a very long day, and I'll cut it right here. I'm going to try and make this a more consistent series whenever there's a patch coming out or whenever there's news. Try and give my opinions and see if anybody will actually talk with me. But again, leave your comments down below if there's something you want to address or something you want to legitimately discuss or bring up, including your opinions. I actually want to talk with people about this. And again, consider subscribing for more. I will be mainly on Twitch under ITP Paladin 929, so go ahead and find me there. My link will be down below. That is pretty much all for today. I'm going to go get some sleep and take care of the baby. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. ADR 929, I'll see you on the other side.